They hit without warning by Pure Shine 6001. Ma'am, we have an unidentified object at the edge of the system and coming toward us. Hermione Thornton, the station master, put down her paperwork and walked over to the Voxel operator's station. A large blip was marked, heading towards the center of the system. All right, keep an eye on it. Could just be a stray asteroid. If it gets too close, we'll notify the mining operation and see if they can't shift its trajectory. Yes, ma'am, the operator answered, returning to his screens. She had barely gotten back to her desk before he called out again, this time with a hint of worry in his voice. Ma'am, the object is accelerating. Collision course with the station in 10 minutes. Ops, bring it up on screen, she said. If it was accelerating, it had to be a ship. However, a ship should have had a beacon on it, marking it on the voxel detector. The main view screen sprang to life, and the stars spun momentarily as the camera panned toward that part of the system. In the center of the screen was something that almost looked like an asteroid. It was oval-shaped and pockmarked with holes all over, but clearly visible were the exhaust plumes of multiple thrusters pointed in every direction. No ship I've ever seen, Hermione muttered. Then she ordered, try hailing it. The signalman typed in commands, then depressed the transmit button. Unidentified vessel approaching Crescent Station. Please heave to and identify yourself. There was a long pause before he adjusted the frequency and repeated his message. I'm getting feedback, he said. Like they're receiving, but no response. They've sped up, warned Ops. Hermione glanced at the screen and saw they had indeed sped up and were now pointed directly at the station. Call them again. Warn them if they don't heave to, we will lock them in the tractor beam. She told the signalman, Ops, get ready to lock them up. If they get closer than 1,000 kilometers, I want you to hold them there until we can get somebody to board and investigate. Roger that, Ops answered. Hermione watched the vessel on screen as it came closer, heedless of the signalman's warnings. Ops, can you decrease the magnification? She asked. That's not magnified, Ops answered. The vessel was huge, Hermione realized. It must be close to a quarter of the size of the station. Several civilian vessels doing their normal routines could be seen as small specks on the screen, much closer to the station's cameras. Voxel, how far out are they? Hermione was beginning to worry the vessel would be a hazard to traffic around the station. Just under 1,500 kilometers, the Voxel operator reported. Suddenly, a blood-red beam lanced across the screen, and the station shook. Decompression alarms sounded, and Hermione grabbed hold of the nearest desk to steady herself. What happened? Damage report. The vessel just destroyed our tractor beam, reported Ops. Some sort of energy lance. It went straight through the station. Decks 42 to 48 are damaged, but the pressure doors are sealed. Hermione turned to the signalman. Send out a mayday. Warn civilian craft to get away from the station and leave the system if they can. The signalman nodded, white-faced and shaking. He mashed down on the emergency transmit button. Mayday! 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 Crescent Station is under attack from an unknown vessel. All civilian craft evacuate the system immediately. Mayday! 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 There was a moment's silence. Then the communications speakers exploded in a jabber of confused, scared ship captains. Hermione tried to drown it out, focusing on what needed to be done to manage the damage to the station. On screen, a fixture on the hostile vessel that had looked like an antenna glowed red. Then a beam shot out and ran the length of a nearby cargo ship that was endeavoring to leave the station. Hermione felt her stomach clench as she watched the ship split open and all its cargo, atmosphere, and crew disperse into the cold vacuum of space. Then there was a squelch over the communication speakers, and the firm, authoritative voice of a naval officer came through the speakers. This is the 7th Task Force. We are en route to render assistance. ETA is 8 minutes. The speakers squelched again, signaling the end of the transmission. In 8 minutes, all they'll find is debris and bodies, Hermione thought as she watched the hostile vessel fire again. This time it vaporized a small surface shuttle that was trying to flee into the planet's atmosphere. There was nothing they could do but watch the carnage. The jabber of civilian captains was squelched again, and this time a happy Yankee drawl came through the speakers. This is PDF vessel Icarus. We are engaging the enemy. As the speakers squelched off, The small frigate zipped into view on the top of the station's screen. Its thrusters were clearly on afterburners as it headed straight towards the hostile behemoth. Captain Sigil was the local planetary defense force leader. The gallant fool is going to try and save the station, Hermione thought as she raced to the signal station and mashed down the transmit button. Captain Sigil, that ship is 100 times your size. You don't have a chance. She released the button, leaning on the desk as she watched the frigate continue undaunted on the view screen. Captain Sigil's happy drawl returned over the speakers. You focus on getting those civvies to safety. We'll buy you some time. Then, as if he were giving orders at a yearly drill, she heard him say, "Fire our railgun at that guy's stinger." In the background, they heard the weapons officer answer, "Aye, aye," and on the screen, a blue flash signified the launch of the projectile. The hostile vessel's thrusters burned brighter as it turned toward the little frigate. Hermione mashed down the transmit button again. "You've got their attention. Now get out of there." "That's an order," she almost begged. She saw the signalman shaking his head even before she lifted her hand off the button and knew what he was about to say. "He can't hear you. He's still got his mic open. And because he's a military vessel, he's squelching all other traffic in the system." The brave, gallant fool knew exactly what he was doing, Hermione thought. With his mic open, he was preventing the civilian pilots from panicking over the communications system and spreading their panic to others. This way, pilots would be forced to focus on the task of finding their own way to the edge of the system, instead of sitting in a blind panic, waiting for instructions. She stood up slowly, tears coming to her eyes as the captain's calm voice returned over the speakers. "I don't think we'll have enough time for another one of those," the captain drawled, as if discussing whether to have another helping at dinner. "Navigation. Spin us around to give our guns the best possible angle and keep us there. Guns. Give 'em hell." The control room watched, magnifying the screen as the little frigate spun until all 8 of her autocannons were pointed towards the enemy. All 8 barrels began blinking at 3 flashes per second as they poured what ammunition they had into their enormous adversary. The hostile vessel turned, its firing antenna glowing red until it was pointed at Icarus. Then it fired. The control room gasped in unison as the little frigate was cut in half amidships, her thrusters dying out quickly as the fuel was vented into space. The speakers squelched as the transmission finally ended. Tears began to run down Hermione's cheeks, but she couldn't look away. Even though the ship was crippled, most of the autocannons continued to fire. Their militia crews, locked in pressurized compartments, were determined to keep the enemy's attention as long as they could. The hostile ship turned and fired again and again until the last autocannon stopped firing. Then it swung back towards the station, its weapon powering up again. Hermione shook herself, releasing the white-knuckled hold she'd had on the nearest chair back. She looked over at the voxel screen. All the civilian ships had either made it to the edge of the system or had already jumped. They were the only target left before the colony on the planet's surface. If this was it, so be it. "Ops," she said, a little shakily. "Sound the decompression alarm and lock down all the bulkheads. Let's make it as hard to take us apart as possible." "Ops," a retired Navy man nodded silently and gave her a salute. As the decompression alarm sounded again, a wave of static covered the screens momentarily. When it passed, the control room erupted in a cheer. There, between the station and the hostile vessel, were 2 Navy battlecruisers from the 7th Task Force. As Hermione watched, their massive artillery turrets turned towards the hostile ship and flung red-hot projectiles towards its nose. Hermione smiled and said a silent prayer of thanks. The sacrifice of Captain Sigil and the 56 brave militia men and women of his crew had saved them. The end. Like and subscribe for more content.